everybody look at the color of the chairs.
Enjoy. These are here for you.
We're going to get started. Thank you so much for joining us here tonight. My name is Bex. I'm the events coordinator here at Books Are Magic. And we're so thrilled to have Heather Christle and Kimberly Belflower here with us to celebrate in the Rhododendrons. I just have a few quick housekeeping notes to go over before we get started. At the end of the evening, we'll be doing a hand-raised Q&A with the audience. Favorite questions, hold them tight. Try our best to get them answered. After that, Heather will be signing and personalizing near where you checked in. We will let you know when and where to line up for that. If you're joining us virtually on the live stream, we'd love to encourage you to buy a copy of In the Rhododendrons online using the link in the description. So the reason we're all here tonight, In the Rhododendrons, I've never said that word so many times, is a deeply moving, immersive, and lyrical hybrid memoir about her mother, Virginia Woolf, and the transformative power of writing. When Heather Christle realizes that she, her mother, and Woolf share a traumatic history, she begins to rewrite and intertwine each of their stories in search of a more hopeful narrative and future she can live with. It is our nonfiction subscription pick for the month. So we are huge fans of Heather, and you should all buy the book, because I don't want to shelve it after that. I'd love to just order more and make my coworker shelve it. Heather Christle, star of tonight's show, is the author of The Crime Book, which we also have for you to not purchase, and 4 poetry collections, an associate professor of English and creative writing at Emory. Her writing has been published in The Believer, Elle, Granta, London Review of Books, and New Yorker, and she was recently recipient of the George A. and Eliza Gardner Howard Foundation Fellowship in Nonfiction. Conversation extraordinaire tonight. So excited to have Kimberly Belflower, playwright and educator, originally from a small town in Appalachian, Georgia. Her most recent play, John Proctor is the Villain, which is best play this year. It's only April, but I can say that. Made its Broadway debut this year. She was an MFA from University of Texas at Austin. Teaches playwriting at Emory as well. Without any further ado.
Were you going to say delusion?
I was going to say delay.
I thought
but I think delusions is good. Without further diluting my importance in tonight's event, please join me in the warmest welcome to Heather and Kimberly.
I'm clapping for you now.
Hey, hi. There's a couple seats if you all want seats. I'm sure like people would like scoot if you want to not be like caught on the ground. If you like being on the ground, I get it. Like I like being on the ground too. I don't want to deny people the ground. So I'm so glad to see you all. I'm so delighted to be here with my brilliant friend and colleague Kimberly, whose play just destroyed me on Sunday, but I have managed to put myself back together enough to be here, which is good. So I'm going to start with just reading a little bit from the book. And I'll just set it up by saying that, the book is basically about me, my mother, and Virginia Woolf, and me in relation to Virginia Woolf, my mother, and myself. I'm going to be reading from part 3. So in part 1, there's a few trips to England, which is where my mother is from. She grew up there, and I was going back there frequently to visit. Part 2 goes into being stuck in a closet in the pandemic because it was the only place in the house where I could be alone to work and write, and like going a little wild in my process of writing and not being able to go to the place that I was dying to write about. And then in part 3, I finally get there, and it's like amazing. And so I'm reading from part 3 when I've been there for a little bit, so I've calmed down slightly. I think that's all you need to know. Okay. Also, I have a cold, but I'm far enough away, I hope, that I will not make anybody sick, and I will try to read as loudly as I can. At night, I cross the Thames again, back to South Bank Centre, where my friend Jack and some others are giving a poetry reading. The sky is dark and the concrete is aglow. Early, I circle the grounds, go back to the river. It is still moving in the same direction. Jack comes and finds me, brings me to the green room, where he introduces me to Anthony and Joelle and Rebecca and Safia and Wayne, whom I already know, and nobody is wearing a mask, and they offer me a beer, and I give over, think, let me have this one night. I do not have a precise map to lay over me, but I think the auditorium in which they speak their poems is in roughly the place where a model of the Crystal Palace would have stood during the Festival of Britain in 1951. I am not inside the model. I am inside, says Safia's poem, Muhammad Ali's fist. Good. There I go. I turn to Wayne and make my eyes go wide. He nods. I am so happy. Afterward, in a bar beneath the National Theatre, everyone foams up with joy and drink. It is the first in-person reading since the pandemic began. Some of us babble, some of us blink, and whatever form our lack of social graces takes is understood and forgiven. Wayne says that behind us is an actor from a show I've never seen, and I tell him a game I like to play, a game I haven't been able to play for ages. Everyone around me, I pretend, is an actor, reciting lines and following stage directions according to a script they've endlessly rehearsed, and it's stunning. They're flawless. The timing so intricate. Look, the glass she knocks over has to break just so. Her face register, but not too early, her surprise. The props have been perfectly set. Look at Jack in his Jackness, about to speak the line from that poem he loves so. Wow, the rain, rose beetles. How lucky we are to have stumbled into this scene, surrounded by such naturalistic talent. I cannot play forever. I have plans to attend to. The matter of Knoll. This is the house that Vita Sackville-West, who was Virginia Woolf's lover for a time, grew up in, and around which Woolf built the plot of Orlando. I've stuck to my stubborn idea of getting as close to Woolf's last page as I can on the grounds of the house where Vita Sackville-West grew up, the house around which the plot of Orlando is built. It's not Vita I'm looking for. It's Woolf's imagination. I want it to be a real place, but I'm afraid to go there alone, of being caught and thrown out. Are we still on for Knoll? I ask Jack. Yes, he says, and with the index finger of the hand holding his beer pointed at me like he's hitting a mid-air pause button, he turns to Anthony. Are you up for a midnight drive? Yeah, sure, where are we going? Anthony is putting on a performance of his sense of adventure, but it's based on a true story. His boldness is real. It runs through his writing and his life. Quickly, one poem demands, snapping me to a doomed attention. When was the last time you gargled magnets? I don't know. Was I supposed to? I want him to like me. Let me start again. I explain the plot, how the National Trust said I could not stay at Knoll until midnight, how I've scouted the grounds on Street View and found what looks like a scalable fence, but it's more than 3 miles from the hotel where I'll be staying, and I'm nervous to walk that far on my own so late at night. So you're asking me to break into a National Trust house, says Anthony. No. Just the grounds, I say, hoping this sounds reasonable. It's just trespassing, says Jack. If we get caught, they'll just ask us to leave. I'm in, says Anthony. And for a moment, it's as if we actually are. We've made it. It's midnight at Knoll, and I am with friends. I have to get back to the hotel. Jack says he'll walk me over the river, then catch a train or a bus home. The concrete is still gold beneath the street lamps, the Thames black. When a street lamp illuminates a tree, I pretend it is the tree itself that is sending light out from within. Sometimes I am able to untether myself from pretending and coast all the way to belief. Sometimes I don't want to come back. So how's it been? How's your trip? Incredible. I can't believe I'm here. And part of it's family? Yeah, I saw my cousin today. It's hard though. I have all these questions. I look up at the arch of an underpass and turn back toward him. I'm trying to put back together this night I don't really remember. Jack sets his face into a question and waits. There was this night when I was 14. My grandfather died and I came over with my mother for the funeral, but I stayed with my cousin. He was living with someone else then. I stayed with them, and they took me out one night and got me really drunk. And then this guy, I never really know how to say this. Jack is listening with such attention, I am afraid to meet his eyes. I never feel like rape is exactly the right word, but he took me outside into some alley, and I mean, it's not like I could consent. I was drunk and I was 14. I smile, give my hands a little lift, like I am testing the weight of something invisible in the air. Then that's all you need to say. I pull my lips in and nod, and we reach the bridge over the river, and he does not leave until I'm safe on the other side.
Oh. I literally reread that part on a train this morning, and I was still just like wrapped.
Oh, I love that.
I was telling Heather earlier, like we're colleagues at Emory, and I know her, but if I didn't know her and I read this book, I would become obsessed with her. So it's like there are these layers of this where I'm like, I know you, and also like.
And you probably realize it's mutual because the play, oh my God.
Yeah, I was going to say it's my play Destroying You is revenge for your book Destroying Me when I read it in January. So, but yeah, I mean, I guess like we were just talking about this back there, but you all like just in hearing that part, the book is about so many things. It holds so many layers of history and just so much. I won't even try to like encapsulate it, but it's so funny. And I think that like when you read the synopsis, it can be like, oh, this is a book about trauma. But it's so fucking funny. So yeah, I'd be like, yeah, you all heard that.
That felt great, by the way. Thank you. That was amazing. I really appreciate that. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, like, is that something that like you're conscious of when you're writing about like heavy subjects? Is that like something you discovered as you're going, like, yeah, just like talk more about like the role of humor in this book.
So I mean, I've always loved being funny in writing. Like, I think my poems started in that mode, which I think came out of maybe having like an improvisatory approach to the writing of them. But yeah, I mean, if you say like this book is about Virginia Woolf, my mother and me, and sexual assault and colonialism and trying to approach trauma, like it's like,
yeah,
that sounds important, which is like deadly, right? And you know, I think that the book does take those things seriously, but it also recognizes that those events occur in the world, and the world is full of all kinds of notes. The whole keyboard is there. And when I am playing, when I'm making, I think it would be impossible for me to constrain myself to just one section of the keyboard. Like I want it all. We experience it all. Life is it all. Yeah. And then also there is maybe a slightly political element to it. And I think that you get this. But refusing to be the like tragic rape girl.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I mean, your play so beautifully shows this like playfulness that occurs even in the midst of the moments themselves, right?
Yeah. No, like I was just thinking about that with what you were saying. Like there's a scene in my play where two characters are at a gas station and they've been through hell, and they're both crying, and there are all these things going on, and then they keep like saying these things to like poke each other and make each other laugh, and then the scene ends in them like laughing for like 5 minutes straight, and it kind of like breaks the play a little bit. Yeah, because that is like what that's what life is. That's what humanness is. And yeah, there is not one thing, and just because like an act of violence was committed on a body doesn't mean that body is that thing.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it becomes, I think, really crucial to gain access to the release of that laughter. Like it feels so excellent, you know?
Yeah.
And perhaps especially when you've been holding something so tight, to just really let go.
Yeah.
You feel the difference of it, perhaps even more so than you would in a book that is like funny all the way through.
Totally. Yeah. Is that like, are you aware when you like write a funny line? Are you like, this is funny?
I make myself laugh. I'm like,
Yes.
you know, in the dark of the pandemic closet, the walls were painted dark brown. We were renting. I couldn't do anything about it. And I'm in there, and you know, it's like Virginia Woolf and Walter Benjamin and my mother, and like, you know, and then I like write something, and I just start like making myself laugh, and all of a sudden I'm like, everyone's off my back, you know? And it's great.
Oh, I
but,
love
like,
that image. It just,
yeah, but like funny stuff would happen in the closet too.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, okay, the world has a sense of humor. Yes. Okay. So when I was stuck in the closet, I had all my books in there. They were like up on shelves, you know, and we had this cat, and this is in the book. Sorry. It's like the tiniest spoiler. But I was working in there one day, and the cat like came in and knocked a book off the shelf, and like it hit me on the head. And I looked up, and I was like, what? And then I looked down. It's my copy of A Room of One's Own.
Oh my God. That's crazy. Your cat is a witch.
My cat is a witch. Yes, my cat is 100% a witch.
Well, that's like perfect. I mean, there are like two things that would be perfect to go into. So I'm trying to choose in my mind right now. Okay, great. But I mean, like I guess like I'm thinking about the way that you, like at the end of the book, this like health crisis happens. Like, I don't want to get into like the particulars and but it kind of becomes this thing where like the body has been this thing you're exploring, and then this thing happens to your body, and then the body as metaphor, and you being a poet and being so aware of what is happening to you. And that moment with the cat feels like another one of those of like, I'm going to hit you over the head with Virginia Woolf.
Yes.
So like, yeah, I guess like talking about like the role of like living through a metaphor, and like both in your body and also just like as you're moving through the writing of this book.
Yeah, I mean, so much of my like process for making this book was about putting my body in a place.
Yeah.
And sometimes it was a place that I had never been before, but had seen through the pages of literature, or through family stories. And then sometimes it was putting my body in a place that I was returning to for the first time since that night when I was 14.
Yeah.
And I began to think of my body as a like research instrument. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it felt like an experiment to go out and do this and just sort of see like, well, what happens if you put your body in this place? Inevitably things happen, and inevitably the world will surprise you and provide you with metaphors. Like the world is just like, it's a metaphor machine. It's just like, here's another one, here's another one, here's another one. And eventually you're like, okay, I get it. But yeah, so it doesn't feel like giving too much away to talk about this, because I've written an essay about this that is like apart from the book that's in LitHub if you feel like reading deeply into my medical adventures. But as I was finishing this book, I can't believe this really happened. I actually can't. So I sent the manuscript to my mother, who had not read it yet. And I was waiting to sort of like see what she thought, because there's a lot of really intense stuff in here. And then went home and like worked out, because I love working out. And then I woke up in the morning, and my hand and my arm were swollen in this like wild way. And I was like, that's not good. And so I went to the emergency room, and they were like, that's not good. And it turned out I had a pulmonary embolism and a deep vein thrombosis. And it was really wild. But it turned out that the treatment for this, because it was caused by a vein getting crushed with like muscle overdevelopment and stuff, the treatment for this is to take out my top rib. And so
they're like just like looking at their face and like, right.
I mean, do you know what happens if you tell a poet that you're like, we need to take your rib? And I'm just like, okay, but that's dangerous, and not physically, like artistically dangerous. So yeah, it felt very. That was a moment where I actually really was wanting to say to the world, like, this is this is too much. Like, you're taking this too far at this point. Like, can we not literalize this quite so strongly? Like, if somebody had written that in a poem, I would have told them
Like,
to,
that's a little on the nose.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. It's very on the nose.
Sometimes the world is on the nose.
All like,
Sometimes the cat knocks over a book and hits you on the head with it.
Yeah, exactly.
It's too good. But yeah, I mean, so like, and then so bringing it back to hitting you over the head with Virginia Woolf, which your book doesn't do. Your book very like gracefully leads us through the garden of Virginia Woolf. But yeah, I mean, like, it's so, like, my play is called John Proctor is the Villain. It's about like a group of high school girls reading The Crucible in rural Georgia in their English class, and it kind of gives them the language to name things that are going on in their lives. And you say something early on in the book of like, it is rare for you to like have a thought or an experience without thinking of a Virginia Woolf quote about it. So like, I mean, I guess that's a common thing with writers of just making sense of our own lives through like the work that we love or are reading, or sometimes the work that we hate. And like, but yeah, I'm like, when did that start with Virginia Woolf? And was that kind of always an organizing principle with writing about your own life and your mother's life and like all of these things?
Yeah, no, she just like snuck in.
Wow.
I mean, I knew that she was going to be there as part of it, but I think in part because she just has this enormous body of work that we have access to. We have the novels, the essays, the diaries, the letters, the manuscripts of various of these texts. So you can just spend your whole life, and people do.
Yeah.
I mean, the work that Virginia Woolf scholars has done, that they astonish me. I'm a little bit scared of them. Not of Virginia Woolf, just the Virginia Woolf scholars. Yeah, at first I thought that the organizing principle was going to be geographic. I thought it was going to be around Kew Gardens, which is the Royal Botanic Gardens just on the west side of London. It's just down the road from where my mother grew up. It's an important site of family history.
Yeah.
And it just seemed like, oh, I know how to do that.
Right.
It was kind of like the Crying Book, where you go in through this one place, but you get to discover all of these other things. And Kew Gardens is a great site for that. And it's still a very important location in the book. But yeah, then Virginia Woolf like rolls in with her short story Kew Gardens, which I didn't know she had written until I started researching this book. And I was like, well, that's pretty strong, Virginia. And then I realized that she lived nearby. That's why she wrote the story.
Yeah.
And so I thought, well, that'd be kind of fun to like just sort of see like what Virginia Woolf did in Kew Gardens. And I started going to her diaries and like mapping out where she was and mapping out where my mother was. They were never alive at the same time. But it was fun to just sort of like do that. And once I started making that happen, I just couldn't stop reading Woolf,
Yeah.
And she also became, the way that people will practice like bibliomancy and like very often like with the Bible or whatever, but she just became a person that I could like ask a question, like pull a book off the shelf, open it up and be like, this, which is actually sort of what happened at the start of the pandemic. I was, at a loss. I had just lost a dear friend. She died right before the start of the pandemic. And I was just like, what is this world? What's going on?
Yeah.
And this wasn't exactly bibliomancy, but I picked up my copy of The Years, one of her novels, and just opened it up to start reading. And the first sentence is, "It was an uncertain spring." So, like when she hits the note enough times, you're like, okay, like, you're invited. You're come along.
Yeah. And then like so like putting her in relationship with your mom, but then like it feels like in some ways she becomes like kind of an intermediary between you and your mom. And then like kind of in the book, there are these personal histories, like your family histories, and also these global histories and colonialism and America and England and all these. So like, and it does feel like Virginia Woolf is kind of this kind of tether between this like series of doubles that are kind of coming up over and over again. And like, yeah, how did that
well, it did. Some of the stuff with my mom is like really difficult to look at directly, and so it helped to have Virginia Woolf there to kind of like help me ride through it.
Yeah.
My favorite example of this, though, is like a little brattier. So my mother, when she talks about Kew Gardens, her favorite thing to complain about there is the noise of the airplanes overhead, because Heathrow's not far away, and so there's a lot of airplanes. And she's like, when I was a child, it was very peaceful and quiet. And so I like to point out that, or I was like very pleased when I read Kew Gardens and got to the end, and it talks about the drone of the airplanes overhead. Because that was in 1919. So it's very bratty, very, very bratty. But it's nice to be like, well, Virginia Woolf is back. But no, she was just good company too. And she could tell me things that I trusted about the place in ways that I sometimes didn't trust my mother's description of things. And not necessarily because of personality, but perhaps because of just access to certain kinds of language. My mother is an artist, but she works visually, and Woolf is working with language, and so I'm with her in a different kind of way. But then also, Woolf wasn't someone that I could just like ride along with. There were things that I had to sort of like distance myself from with her as well, and look at and be like, okay, well, what's going on behind that story as well? Because I mean, we are all complicit in the various systems, but she had famously had an occasion of dressing up in blackface to take part in the Dreadnought hoax, where she and some friends like bluffed their way onto a British like high security naval ship, and so that was a moment where I wasn't like, come on, Virginia, but a moment of like, okay, like, well, let's keep going, let's learn the history here, and like, where did that story come from? And it turns out that there's a really important story to be told of a boy named Prince Alameyu, who I am very fond of.
But that's so interesting, of like, the story that your mom is telling herself and you about her life and the airplanes, and then like as you kind of get deeper and deeper into Virginia Woolf, kind of being like, that doesn't quite add up, Virginia, or like, oh, there's more over here. That's fascinating. I wanted to talk also about like, and this is another kind of shared thing in our work, is like being in
cheers.
I
am so glad.
I am so glad. We're all so glad. But I mean, I think both my play and your book are us in conversation with our teenage selves, and both like hard things that happen in those years, and also like trying to recover those years and hold on to the person you were. And and like once you go into the closet in the pandemic and kind of feeling like the layers of time, and while time is kind of standing still, and what is that like being in conversation with yourself, and also like trying to find like organizing principles to tell the story of like a very tender time.
It's I love the respect that you show for teenage girls, which again it's not about like pathologizing their trauma, but it's just taking seriously all of the parts of their lives. And I think that doesn't happen frequently enough, to have all of that happening at once. It seems to be either sort of like just teenage girls, or like the teenage girls. And I think that they are so abundantly complicated and strange and surprising and learning. And I think that because I knew that there were events that were significant and that I've talked about over the years, but I hadn't kind of done the like investigation to go back and like really dig into like the firsthand evidence of these years. And then there were some things that I actually had never seen before, some documents that like my mother had written, that gave me an understanding that I just never would have had if I hadn't been writing this book. Even just something as simple as putting together the fact that there were these two incidents that were just 8 weeks apart, and I had not realized that before. And it completely changed my sense of, especially the second event. I'm being vague, I'm sorry. Spoilers. But yeah, I was glad to be able to do like a serious research. And I think it turned out to be a lot sadder than I knew, you know. And there's some stories that like over time in families get told as like being kind of funny.
Right.
You joke about them a bit, and then if you actually stop and look, you're like,
yeah,
really? So yeah, even like listening to this like audio tape of my sister and I when we were really little, there were things that we used to laugh at and still do, you know, but also that now I'm thinking about it more particularly, I'm like, you're describing like an expectation that a 3-year-old will behave perfectly when they've been at a wedding all day, and you're upset that they're like pulling on your sleeve. That's odd.
Yeah. And then like, I mean, obviously the book is talking about your mother and her history too, and then also your child like is woven in. Obviously, like your child is living their history, and yeah, like writing about being a teenager, writing about being a daughter, inhabiting kind of your mother and Virginia Woolf while also being a mother, and how do you hold all of those selves at the same time?
I don't know. I really don't know. I mean, I think that's one of the things that the book is trying to figure out, right? Is, I mean, it took me a whole book to kind of figure that out. So, but one of the things that I say towards the end is talking about this word that I utter as if it were a needle that could puncture the present and draw the many selves I have been together. And I don't know that I can do that in the physical world in time as we experience it at any given moment, you know, but I can do it in art. And I'm really grateful that I can do it in art. I think that's the closest I can answer that truthfully.
I'm grateful you can do it in art. I just thought of another question and then it immediately went out of my brain. It was about the closet. Yes, we have referred to the closet several times. And when we were in the back room before we came out, you referred to it as a portal. And I just loved that because it is, in this moment when we couldn't go anywhere. And like you already said, like you're writing about place, but like, what was it, like a time machine? Was it like a teleportation device?
It was so many things. I would go in and, you know, I could be in like Pageland, you know, I had my books. I had a lot of printed out PDFs. I have a bad habit of printing out PDFs because I want to like highlight them. They're different when you highlight them. And
that doesn't seem like a bad habit to me.
I
think it's good.
I feel like generally speaking, like probably writers cause less harm to the environment overall in their lives, and so like we're allowed a certain amount of paper. Like there's an understanding.
1,000,000%.
Okay, cool. But then I also had these other methods. Like I had a little Viewmaster toy, you know, the like red toy with the orange lever. Hey, people over there. Hi. So if you look through it, it shows you two like very slightly different perspectives on the same scene. And because you're looking at one image with one eye and one image with the other, your brain then does the work of creating a sensation of depth, which is really cool. And so I had a vintage Viewmaster disc of Kew Gardens. And so sometimes I would just like go in the closet and turn the light on and like look up and be like, because you need the light to make it work. And then sometimes I would use a Google Cardboard, which is like a stereoscope, which is the same technology as Viewmaster. But yeah, I would look through it and try to like walk around London. They're like it's like a poor man's VR, basically.
Oh my God.
Yeah. But then also books themselves, of course, were portals. Conversations with people that I had. Although I did those more walking. I'm a walking talker person. And then also like home videos and stuff. My father very kindly like digitized things and sent them to me, and I would go in the closet and like watch this like very, very slow blue line creep across the screen because it was this like massive file.
Oh my God.
He doesn't know how to compress things. So yeah, there were all kinds of, and then there were so many things that like got cut from the book. These two women right here,
yeah, I want the director's cut.
So there were some very long versions because I got really into the portals in the closet, and like I probably went to too many universes. And then my lovely agent Meredith and my fabulous editor Maddie helped me so much to find the shape within that was going to, like still be rich, still, hold many different threads, but be available to people.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like a magic trick, like, which I know it's not. Like, I know that magic is hard work, essentially. But it's also, so you started writing this in 2018, yeah? And that's the same year I started writing my play. And so that is interesting.
It is interesting. It is interesting. And to have them like being, I mean, your work has been out for longer, but it's like really out right now.
Yeah. Well, no, because like obviously theater was so disrupted by the pandemic in a way where I didn't touch the play for 2 years. And then just yeah.
And I feel like it's an interesting moment to look back now and be like, okay, so is that it with Me Too?
Right.
Are we done?
I know. Both of our work dealing with the things it deals with coming out of that moment in time. And then both of us starting in the first Trump administration. And also like, it's like, I think both of our works deal with like cycles and how things repeat.
Yes.
And inherited trauma, inherited violence, like I'm just doing this motion over and over again because that's what it is.
No, I would do it with you.
We
might make a spell. Let's cast a spell that stops this particular cycle.
Oh my God, yes, please.
Okay.
We're doing it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's like, I guess I don't have like a neat question about that, but like, not only are you in conversation with your not only are you in conversation with your past self, but like also like it kind of feels like, I mean, it feels sick that like we're in kind of this compressed file version of history repeating itself, where it's like, in your book, it's generations and decades and centuries. And it's like, oh, 2018, here we are again. Like, and maybe we never went away. Maybe it's not again. Maybe it just is.
But I think that that's also part of the work of the book, and I think the work of your play, is that it's really important to recognize that just because something is repeating, it does not trap us. We have choices that we can make.
Yeah.
Right now, we have choices that we can make.
Right.
And part of me going back to that alleyway from the night I was 14 was because I could make different choices then. I could make different choices as an adult in that space than I could as a 14-year-old.
Yeah.
And it was really important to go back there and do that other thing.
Yeah.
And I think that right now, if we find ourselves in a moment of repetition of structural violence, we have it in our power very often. And we've seen people do this, right? We've seen people like interrupting the deportation processes. We've seen people just taking a stand.
Right.
Like we have choices available to us.
Yeah.
And so it can be very easy. And I understand the despair that one can feel in this moment. And I also feel like we are called to be conscious, alert, aware, to really see what is happening around us and to recognize that it is not just unfolding in front of you, but you are a player in it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, that's something we've talked about a lot in rehearsal of like, this play is about like these teenage girls realizing that the systems aren't going to take care of them, so they have to take care of each other.
Yes.
And like, yes, it's exactly like we can show up for each other in ways that disrupt that cycle.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that a lot of people are doing amazing work with that right now. It's so good to go out and talk to your neighbors and just find out what they need, and to tell them what you can offer, and vice versa. It's crucial. I mean, just like having that first set of conversations with your neighbors. And if we keep going, we're going to build something that that the system never could.
Yeah, it's beautiful. And with that, we're going to open it up to questions from you all. Yay!
Let me just sit there. Or I'll just sit. Okay. Thank you both for the introduction of the book, not only the book, but also your life. And I do have a big question for you guys, because you are the educators, and the current situation for like a recent graduate like me is not really good for the job market and everything else. But I want to know, like, as an educator, what is your suggestion to the recent graduate, and what is your motivation for keep being an educator for all of the students you've met and all of the see the job market and how insane it is right now?
Ooh, I'm going to repeat the question for the live stream because we have microphones. So and let me know if I'm distilling this in the right way. So the question is about what would our advice be to recent graduates, and what is our motivation for being educators and in this crazy job market and moment in time? Great. Yeah.
Oh. So some of the advice that I would give, I think, would be advice that I would give at any moment, which is that regardless of how the world is responding to the work that you are making, it's very important that you keep going, that you keep up your practice, and that you find your people that you are in conversation with, so that you are learning from each other, so that you are, again, building community right there on the ground with each other and learning how to be artists together. I grew up in punk rock, and so that's kind of just like how we did things, and so it's the advice I like always go back to, but I think it stands up to the test of time.
Absolutely.
And I think that that's something that can resist whatever happens in the job market, and but also, I mean, economic struggle is real, and I mean, whatever work you can find that like also lets you continue writing or making art is good. It doesn't matter. I know poets who do so many things. I know a poet who shoes horses, which is
wow.
I know.
Yeah.
I don't know what the like hiring situation is for the horseshoe world, but just it's okay to put your art at the forefront regardless of what is happening in your life.
I do appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah. No, and I like everything that Heather said, and like when I first graduated school, I moved to New York, and it was the first time I ever lived outside of Georgia. I'm from a really small town in rural Georgia, and I was a nanny for 4 years. And like at the time, I remember my parents being like, "What are you doing? You just got a college degree." And I'm like, "I'm figuring out how to pay my rent so I can like make my art and figure out like how to be a person in the world." And that was the best decision I could have made. So yeah, I think sometimes we think that like careers and lives are linear in a way that they're just not. So like give yourself permission to do the job that feels like it's not connected to like what you want your life to look like, because it's all accumulating.
Absolutely. Yeah. And then why do you teach?
Why do I teach?
You're so good at it.
You're so good at it. Yeah, I mean, I love teaching for a lot of reasons. I think that I think selfishly, my writing is better when I'm teaching. I think it keeps me honest. If I'm like teaching playwriting craft to my students, that then like I'm not practicing that in my own work. I'm like, why am I resisting that? Or why am I teaching that? Like there's something that's not true. And so I think that part is really useful. I think that also like I love teaching college students. Like a lot of my students have never written a play before they're in my class. And I remember what it was to be like in wonder of the world and the work that you're discovering, and to like, I don't know, my students like write plays that are so fearless in ways that I'm like often thinking about like producibility and blah blah blah, and I'm like, no, I want to write about like this wild thing over here and like blow up form. And yeah, so I think it keeps me excited. Why do you teach?
I mean, a lot of the same reasons. Yeah, it helps me to call into question, like, well, do I believe this?
Yeah.
And if so, why?
Mhm.
And all of that. But I have an old student in the room right now, which is kind of great. I teach because I keep meeting fabulous poets. And I love meeting new poems.
Yeah.
And you get to like every week when you're
Yeah.
in a poetry workshop, like fresh baked poems every week. And it feels like a great honor to be like constantly like meeting them when they're in that state.
Yeah.
And to be able to be a part of their lives is fantastic.
Yeah, it is. Cool. What other questions do you guys have? Yeah. We'll go there and then there. Yeah.
I was wondering if like you had always planned on like wanting to write a memoir, if there was like a spark that
The question, just for the live stream, is had Heather always planned on writing a memoir, and was there a spark that led to this?
I guess that like I like dipped my toe in the water with the crying book, which was my last book, which is a book about crying. It's so much easier to describe that book by just saying the title and instead of like In the Rhododendrons, a memoir with appearances by Virginia Woolf, which I do. I love. I'm very fond of this title, but no. So I started having some elements of memoir there, and so I guess I like just kind of walked backwards into it without thinking about it too much. And then, yeah, I mean, like I said, I thought I was writing about Kew Gardens. I really did. And this is just where the work went. And for me, part of my process so far has been like, follow the work where it goes. I'm actually like experimenting right now with plotting something out ahead of time, like completely, like, yeah, I'm making this like very detailed
laughing.
But because to me that feels like the ultimate form of experimentation. Like that's experimental writing for me, you know?
Yeah.
It's fun.
We share that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, we had another hand over here. Yeah.
I was just gonna ask, you know, and you kind of shared this already, but how you approach writing about something very dark and personal for other people, and not, you know, sort of falling into that tragic kind of stereotype, and how you balance kind of a light feeling or some kind of broader message, and you know, why even share those stories in the first place.
So the question is how do you approach writing about something dark and heavy and personal, and how do you translate that for other people, for an audience? Was that?
Yeah.
Okay, great, beautiful.
I think that I mean it comes down to the question of craft and artistry, which is very often for me like as important, if not more important sometimes, than what it is that I'm writing about. I love sentences.
Yeah, they're good.
They're very, very good. And then realizing like the chronology of a sentence and the fact that you're revealing things in a certain order, and if you just like move it in a different way, it like happens differently in a person's brain. It's very exciting.
Yeah.
And so I can delight, I can have a great time making sentences about horrible stuff that happened to me. Like truly, I can. And very often if the writer is having a good time writing, then even if the material is heavy, weighty, the reader is going to probably like still feel that that momentum or something. Because I would hate to have a reader feel like I'm burdening them with something. That like that's not the idea. Like you know what I mean? It's made into art, and part of that is introducing humor. Part of it is like inviting Wolf over when you need to. Looking around and seeing what else is also there, because other things are also always there.
Yeah, you should write a play, because then the sentences get spoken out loud and you can think about how they sound.
Scary though.
But no, and then you make your actors crazy because you're like, cut that and it makes the whole rhythm different, and it's so pleasurable. You would love it.
But then you sit and you're not in control.
It is that is hard, but also beautiful.
Yeah, no, you're very brave.
I think we have time for one more question. Yes.
Yes, Meredith.
Just listening to you talk about your process, even here, so often, I think when we think about memoir, there's sort of the word confessional might come up, or excavation might come up, and I think about confessional as something where the thing you're trying to tell is like right there, and you're sort of just, someone is just sort of releasing it, versus excavation where that thing exists and it's just a question of digging it out and then kind of releasing it. But you're talking about memoir writing as research, which is so interesting to me, maybe also sort of related to your process of how you ended up here. But I wonder if you can talk a little bit about sort of the value or possibility in approaching memoir writing, about that oneself truly as a research subject that you maybe don't know, and then there's something else to discover.
Yeah.
So the question is about writing a memoir as research, in a research-based approach, versus like the kind of confessional. Yes, that's the core of it.
I mean, I think that part of it comes from my training as a poet, right? That like very often poets will start writing a poem not because they know something about themselves or the world, but because they know that there is an image or a line that like needs to be part of something, and then you sort of follow that language where it goes. For me, my poetry tends not to usually be like directly autobiographical. It has like a little bit more like playfulness and imagination. But even within that, you're still like discovering things about yourself. Like your imagination is particular and revealing. There's this great line from Virginia Woolf's diary where I know, where she goes, "How I interest myself." And the fact is, like, I am very interested in human selves.
Yeah.
They are so interesting. You've met some of them, like, and it just so happens that one's own self is the closest self at hand, and therefore the one that you can most easily research. And and so I feel just really lucky that that's true. And I do feel like there's a lot that I still don't know about myself. I'm gonna keep surprising myself, I hope. Not too badly.
But no, then it's like the self as portal, in the way that the closet was a portal. I don't know, like by excavating the self, it's yeah. Like we're not done.
No, we're not done. There's so much more, and that doesn't just mean like looking forward to what is going to happen, but like there's still more for us to understand about the past and how it shapes our present and what we might do to move into the future.
Yeah. What a beautiful note to end on. Amazing. Yay. So fun.
Thank you all so much for coming. Thank you to Heather and Kimberly for joining us tonight. If you're still listening to the live stream, you can buy a copy of the book from the link in the description. If you're here, you can buy a copy at the register. I'll be standing over there. and I won't leave until we sell out. So you should get over there. Heather is going to be signing where my lovely coworker Ben is now pointing. We're going to have you line up along this wall because at some point we're going to move the tables in and where you're sitting. So against the wall would be great.
Thank
have a
you
great night. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you to Books Are Magic.